Let's hear from Richelle. Richelle, you do not have any Africa direct investment, but you have some exposure through your investment managers. Tell us about that Africa exposure and what your consultants could do better, if any, to ensure that you and the Board of Trustees get more comfortable with African exposure.
Good morning. Well, my name is Richelle, and I'm the investment officer for the state of Idaho retirement system. We're about a $16 billion fund, and we have approximately $80 million invested in Africa through our emerging markets mandate. We were pretty early on in investing in emerging markets. Back in 1992, our board wanted that as a distinguishing characteristic of our company. So it was implemented back then. But in terms of direct investments, we do not have any direct investments through private equity, private debt in Africa or even China or other countries. And a lot of that is because of our governance structure. So we have a 5-member layman board, and they're all appointed by the governor. And they really delegate down to staff. So we use consultants differently perhaps than Chicago in terms of consultants are hired by the board, and the board depends on the consultants as their check in terms of are we headed in the right direction or not. But in terms of implementation, or if we wanted to encourage any type of direct investments in any country, specifically Africa, that would primarily be driven by investment staff. So that would be myself or my boss, the CIO. And the way that would transpire is going out to these educational events, learning more, getting the contacts. But it's also a matter of, it's not just trust, it's encouraging our board to come to these types of events or events hosted by PPI, who we'll hear from later, to educate our trustees so that there's buy-in from everyone, not just staff, but the trustees, so that there's comfort and knowledge that the specific region you're investing in is safe, that there is liquidity, that there are laws, that these laws are enforceable, that there are regulations and practices and processes in place that are stable and consistent across political leadership. Those are very important characteristics of markets for us, public or private. And so that's primarily why you'll see that we don't have a significant exposure to Africa in the public markets as well. It's because there aren't many public markets within the African continent that offer all of the political and the regulatory stability, so that most of our investments are just through the public markets in South Africa. So I strongly encourage these types of discussions and forums whereby trustees and other staff members can come and learn about the region, the countries, and all of the different country-specific regulatory practices. And consultants really are a double check on that. Is this, if you are going into direct investing in Africa, is that a viable approach? Does that provide you with the returns and or liquidity? Does it fall within your asset allocation guidelines or policy? Because as we all know, that's the one major decision that boards make is the asset allocation. That's the overriding driving force of what we do and where we're trying to get. But I mentioned liquidity, and I just have to, I can't emphasize that enough, because we're invested in private equity, but our allocation is only 8%. Washington, on the other hand, has a much heftier private equity allocation, but that's a history and tradition with their board where they gained comfort in it early on, so they were early movers. But related to that, we only do the retirement system, and we, as with many other state pension plans, are running cash flow negative, which means that liquidity is a huge concern for us. So keeping it locked up in private equity, keeping a large portion of it locked up in private equity is not attractive to us, because we need liquidity to pay out our benefits to our beneficiaries. And then when you add on the prospect of infrastructure, which is an even longer term hold, that provides additional complexity to us and to getting there. So there are hurdles to make. I'm not saying we can't get there, but there has to be a lot of education, and with trust and comfort is time. So it's going to take a long time to get there. So the sooner we can get people educated about all of the underlying markets and the individual issues in each of the underlying markets, the farther along we can get in a period of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Richelle.
Doing business in Africa, you can't afford to be without Africa Investor.